Hello, I'm Darren Grimes and this is GB News. Thank you very much for your company. I'm here with Paul Morland, who wants to talk to us about an incredibly serious issue. He has a paper out through ARC, the conference we're at today, in which he discusses a demographic time bomb in which we have to make a decision. Do we want mass migration or are we going to have more children? Because folks, we can't have our cake and eat it. Ain't that right, Paul?
That is just about right. Really, the choice is three ways, and I use three countries as a model. So in Japan, they don't want mass immigration. They want ethnic continuity. They want homogeneity. They're very unapologetic about talking about it. But Japan's had low fertility rates for 50 years. They don't have enough workers. And the result is the Japanese economy is slowly going down the pan. Its workforce is reducing every year. Its government is twice as indebted as ours is. And its prime minister is talking about civilizational collapse. So that's what happens if you won't have children, but you don't want mass immigration. In Britain, we said we also don't want children. We're having very small families, and like Japan, we've had very small families for 50 years, but we want to keep the lights on. There's a limit to how indebted our government wants to get. It needs workers to pay for the pensions. And so that's why we've seen mass immigration. And my argument is that if we don't raise our fertility rate, if we don't have more kids, we've got that choice. Either ever more immigration to the point that up to half the country could be first-generation immigrants, or we have to choose the Japanese route, which is say we don't want immigration, but we're not having the kids, and we will go down the pan economically. The only third option is what the Israelis have done, despite all the pressures they're under, which is the only country in the developed world to have 3 children per woman. And all I'm saying is we need to have 2 to 3, not 6 or 7. And if we can get back to that 2 to 3 that Israel manages and that we managed in the 60s, then there's a prospect that we'll have enough workers to support our elderly without mass immigration.
Do you think we can do that through the welfare system, incentivize people to have more children? For example, there's a cap, isn't there? 2 children, child benefit, that's your lot.
I think there's a lot that the government could do, and in fact I've written a book which I hope will come out next year called Procreate or Perish. The penultimate chapter of that book is what can government do for us. And there's lots of things government can do for us. Welfare, tax cuts, a whole range of policies to help women in the workplace. But the last chapter of that book is what can we do for ourselves. And my view, and we can see this in Hungary, we can see it in Poland, we can see it in other countries which have pursued what we call pronatal policies, trying to encourage people to have children. It makes a small impact. But if we don't want to do it ourselves, if we don't have a culture that really values our children, that assists our I'm now a grandfather and I'm spending more and more time, thank you, helping my children look after theirs in the hope that they'll have some more. We can participate in so many ways to assist families as individuals, as citizens, as well as, when we're at the right age, having our own. That is the sort of society that is going to have the kind of fertility rate, the kind of birth rate that will mean we neither need mass immigration nor we need to go down the tube.
There has been a full-fronted assault on the nuclear family, the whole concept of the nuclear family, and actually we're told today to have children is to be selfish because you ruin the environment and all of these other laudable-sounding slogans. Do you worry that actually that is a deterrent for people having children?
I think it's a huge deterrent. I think there are 2 very good arguments against the environmental case for not having children. First of all, if you have a child today, that child's emissions are going to be very low for the next 30 years. Children live with their parents, they drive in their parents' car and so on. In 30 years' time, given the way technology is evolving, that child may not have very high emissions at all. If we believe in net zero, if it's actually going to happen, even if it doesn't happen, if we continue down the path of falling emissions, a child born today is going to have very few emissions in 30 years' time. The second thing is that unless you go and live in a cave, if you want to have someone to drive the bus, have someone to fix your doctor's appointment, have someone to fix your tap, have a child to teach in the school, all the things we consume labour all the time if we're not living in a cave. Yeah. But if I say I'm very environmental, I'm too grand and too moral and too ethical to have my own children, but I'll consume labour, what you're really doing is relying on others to have those children. And if they don't have them in the UK, we need mass immigration, and that is transferring people from countries with very low emissions to a country with very high emissions, a rise in their living standard. But so if you're actually environmentally concerned, unless you're prepared to go and live the life of a 15th century peasant, if you're not having children for environmental reasons, you're being hypocritical.
So Paul, just finally then, given your report, very worthy sounding, and the UK dependency increasing by 10% between now and 2080, for example. Given we know all of that, and given that there is no democratic desire, dare I say, for mass migration into Britain. In fact, people would like a hell of a lot less of it, if the polls are to be believed. What would your message be to policymakers right now, given that we do face this cliff edge?
My message to policymakers would be, like Hungary, like Poland, we should look at all sorts of pronatal policies. We haven't even got a government, we've never had a government that says it has a demographic strategy. So Miriam Cates, I was talking to yesterday,
Brilliant.
She's on board, but the government's not. First of all, acknowledge the problem. Secondly, think about the policies, including financial policies. But most importantly, think about how the government can work with society to nudge the culture, so that we end up in a culture more like Israel's, where people actually want to have children. It's not just about governmental incentives, it's about role models, be they Prince William or Beckham, both of whom have 3, or I think Beckham had 4 children. Those are the kind of role models we need, and we need to develop, so that we change from a world where children are uncool to a world where children are the most wonderful, fantastic, having children is the most wonderful and fantastic adventure you can go on in your life.
Absolutely. Paul, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.